Hey, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. And today with me I have Asaf. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good, Alex. What about you?
I'm doing well. This is great. I always love these videos. These are one of my favorite video series that I do on the channel. This, by the way, is Asaf from EZBoardGames. I'll have a link to his channel down below. There's a lot of reviews, how to plays, as well as the Perfect Collection, which is a journey you're currently going on.
True.
It's a pity yours isn't a perfect collection.
It's
which I'm about to get into now.
Yeah, so basically it's just like me trying to get like 100 games that for me is like the perfect collection. And every time that I'm like bringing new games, I have to call like other games that I love just a bit that much less.
Go ahead and check that series out. Again, I'll link to his channel down below. And this series over here, we're going to have to be a lot of disclaimers and clarifications of what this is, because there will always be people who focus on the title, which makes sense, it is the title of the video, as opposed to the actual intent. And now the title is going to be the top 10 worst games in probably EZBoardGames collection. I probably won't say this off, but we'll go with that. The top 10 worst games in EZBoardGames collection. And the content of this video is not the top 10 worst games per se. Those aren't really quite as much fun. These are specifically, to be very clear, because again, people are like, worst games? These are great games. Actually, the 10 games I'm going to go through today arguably are all great for some people. Some of them I even like myself, but I have complaints against them. Either why they're not right for me, or why they are possibly, no, why they're not, or if they're right for me, the thing that I want to complain about. And I don't think any of these games are games that I own, so at least I'm consistent in that value aspect of things. But again, these are not bad games, to be very clear. This whole wall of games behind me, they're all great games, or at least most of them are great games. And the one or two that might be like just games you never heard of. I mean, I think there's a copy of Risk down there. There's a copy of Risk. I didn't pull it off the shelf because that's just not a fun conversation. Sure. So to be very clear, and I'll probably say it multiple times throughout this video for the people who jump past the timestamps, these are not 10 bad games. These are the top 10 worst games in a very good collection. More specifically, 10 games that I have reasonable complaints, or at least I shouldn't say reasonable, my complaints, they may or may not be reasonable, as far as why they didn't work as much for me, even though I respect them. I'm trying to be as infinitely clear, because someone's going to see top 10 worst games and then see that game and think, what are you, crazy? Well, in a collection full of 100 very good games, these are the 10 I want to complain about. That's the conversation. Now, Sal, if you don't know any of these games, well, you don't know which ones I've picked to be more specific.
True.
So we're going to start with one that is not actually on the table. None of them are on the table yet. Many of them will enter the table throughout this video, but we're going to start. There's two that actually I didn't bother even taking off the shelf. And the first is right over my shoulder over here, and that's Darkest Dungeon.
Okay.
Asaf, Darkest Dungeon. Why do you have that game?
So usually I'm not like a kind of a dungeon crawler kind of guy. I think that Darkest Dungeon and Gloomhaven are the only ones that I have.
One of those is a great game.
Okay. And I think that, well, first of all, the first thing that attracted me is like actually the IP. So I love the computer game. I think that it's really awesome, tight, like the theme, everything. And when I did get Darkest Dungeon, even though the whole mythic game, let's not go into it.
Yeah, we're going to separate the company and the game in this case. Sure. This is not a conversation around mythic games, whole separate drama there. You feel free to look into it. We're going to keep this on focus.
Right.
Darkest Dungeon itself, the game.
So the thing is that when I got it to the table, I was like, I didn't have a lot of expectations. You know, like getting a really famous IP and bring it to the table is always like kind of a messy thing. It's complicated, difficult, but I got pretty much the same feelings from like the board game as I had from the PC game. And for me, that's kind of an art.
Interesting. For me, Darkest Dungeon is interesting because I think, first of all, I think the art is gorgeous. I think the miniature production, absolutely amazing. I think the board game is not the worst game ever. Despite, again, top 10 worst games in Asaf's collection specifically. So I don't think it's a bad board game. I've had fun playing it, but to me, the main issues I have with it is that, first of all, the semi-dungeon crawl sequence before you get into the actual fighting feels so tedious to me. It feels like explore, turn blind corner, do random thing. It doesn't feel like a... Like, you haven't played Oathsworn, have you?
No.
There's so many games out there that have a kind of pre-dungeon phase where you have like something you're doing exploratory and then you get into the actual game itself.
Like city event or like
on
the road.
Those kinds of things.
Right.
Many of those experiences I like to various degrees. I think Darkest Dungeons was one of my least satisfying pre-dungeon crawl experience. It just felt like a lot of random stuff happening with like extra maintenance. There's not a ton of fun in those phases.
We're talking about like the moving from one chamber to another?
Yes, before you get into before you're actually setting up and organizing your people and the little line of actions.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the thing is, and we've talked about it today, that you still haven't like played the actual PC.
No, not at all.
Right. So in the actual PC game itself, right, you have that phase of just like going and not so sure like what will be with a torch, you know, like things that you might see, like enemies that you might engage in the way. I do agree with you that this is not the highlight of the game, but it did stay like faithful to the PC game, which is again something that I
So
like.
you
I understand why
appreciate the
I can understand why someone who haven't played like Darkest Dungeon, like the PC game, would like be like, what is that kind of thing? But like for someone who like actually played it and so many hours, that like something that something that for me it's legit in the game.
I want to teach you. I want to get you a bunch of dungeon crawlers. Like there's a bunch because you don't love miniature games in theory. You have a soft spot for Darkest Dungeon, which is definitely a miniatures game.
Okay.
So like it's. I'm curious what is else. Again, I don't think Darkest Dungeon is a bad game. I played it. I've enjoyed it. Just in the realm of other board games, I felt that it had too many weak spots, and that we haven't even gotten to the amount of stat maintenance and all that in the actual dungeon crawler phase. Which again, arguably true to the video game from what I hear. Just the difference is you have a computer doing it for you, which is a little different.
True.
Speaking of having a computer do the work for you, I'm going to jump to the next one over here.
Okay.
Because the next one is Imperium Classics. Now, this one's a bit unfair. I think it's a bit unfair. You haven't played this, have you?
Not yet.
That's why it's unfair. So we only have someone here to attack it. We don't have someone here to defend it, unfortunately.
So I'll tell you.
Why do you want to play it?
Right. So I'll tell you like what drew like my attention to this game. So first of all, my experience with Voidfall. Okay, so I got to play Voidfall obviously before I got to play Imperium Classics. Was like Voidfall is one of my top 5 games like of all times for now. Okay, for 2020 whatever.
High praise.
So I thought to myself, if Nigel Buckle and David Tortzi managed to like bring me a masterpiece like Voidfall that has its flaws, of course, but like such a good game, I'm interested in seeing what else they can produce and bring to the table. Having that being a Civ game, that's like even on top of that. That is again something that like I'm looking like in a board game, a good civilization game. The only thing that I'm not so sure about, that it's obviously, since it's a card game, it's very abstract. So that's like my only concern in this game, but I'm really curious to see what they're going to bring me relatively after Voidfall, my exposure to Voidfall.
So again, usual disclaimers at this point for anyone jumping in. I don't think this is per se a bad game. I didn't enjoy it. This is not even like Darkest Dungeon, at least I enjoyed. I just think there are better dungeon crawlers out there. Imperium Classics, I simply did not enjoy. Now, it's a well-rated game. It's a well-rated system. There's Classics. There's Horizons, I think is the new one. There's Imperium, I don't know. Or maybe it's Classics and I don't know. There's a bunch of them. There's like 3 of these games at this point. It's a very well-loved series.
Legends.
So take Legends. Take my opinion with a grain of salt, a healthy grain of salt. But I felt playing through this was so abstract and dry. The reason I made that like a tangent into it of speaking of having a machine do the work for you.
Yeah.
It felt so mechanical. And to be very clear, David Tursi in particular is a phenomenally well-respected designer who has a ton of work, a ton of highly rated work. So please take my criticism with a grain of salt. But I do find that a lot of his games, at least for me, feel much more mechanically driven, and solo modes can feel a lot more like procedural of do this, then this, and go through this step, and do this, and do this, and this, and look there, and do that. Okay, the AI draws a card. And like things like that. And I'm not referring to the solo mode. I played this game solo, and I played it 2-player. I don't think I played it at more than 2, because you should never play this at more than 2. You should never play this game at more than 2. It's a slow game that can be really long. I believe it's rated best at solo and 2 players. And I just thought, it wasn't that there wasn't a puzzle there. There's an incredibly brilliant puzzle here. But it felt so abstract, but I almost like, in a system that I didn't want it to be abstract. I want it to be a little more thematic. It has cars, it has art, it has a system behind it. And for me, it just felt very mechanical. Probably a very good game, but I didn't get much out of the experience.
Fair enough.
But hey, you might love it. You might love it. We'll see. I have no idea. I don't want to buy it.
Fingers.
Now, I think this is the only one you have. Oh, no. There's at least one more you haven't played. So I guess let's use that as a tangent.
Sure.
Speaking of games you haven't played, we're going to try to keep a theme. We're trying to always connect one game to the next. We're going to see how long we can keep this up. Speaking of games you haven't played, we have Twilight Struggle. I genuinely think this is the only other one you haven't played, but I could be wrong. Twilight Struggle.
So, that is basically, I haven't exposed this game yet into my channel, so it's kind of ruining the surprise for my viewers, but that's cool. So the thing is that that is like literally came to my collection a week ago after someone really recommended me this game. This is a tensed game in a subject that I'm pretty much interested in. So again, this is all connected to like something that I already like know. I don't know if I can say I love that part of history or whatever, but like I feel like more connected, like know it a little bit more. And as I understood, this is a highly tactical game from like GMT that are really known for like their coin games or whatever. So that is something that I'm super interested in.
It is a highly tactical game. There's no question about that. There's no question it's a highly tactical game. I've had this game in my collection for years. I think it's a great game. an extent, the issues I have with this game, and I have plenty of content on my channel if you want to check it out. I have a full Play This Not That between this and Watergate, that I do the full Play This Not That video with Devin from Devin Talks Tabletop while playing Watergate. We play Watergate and finish the game of Watergate while talking about which game we prefer, because Watergate is so much more accessible. Twilight Struggle is an epic game with tons of dynamic back and forth as far as how you take control and wrestle from the Cold War and all that stuff, and there's different things you can do, little insurgencies, a little counter, a little like getting influence in various countries. There's a ton of things you can do, a lot of dice rolling, a lot of dice manipulation, a ton of dice rolling. There's a lot of random chaotic dice rolling that you have to mitigate, and yes, across the course of the game there's going to be a lot of mitigation, but those dice rolls are going to suck the whole time until you get used to that aspect of the game. But then meanwhile you have to figure out where everything goes, and you're just playing this very incredible tug of war. That's what it is. It's a complicated, incredible tug of war where I put a little influence here, you put a little influence back. A struggle war.
That was bad.
Struggle war. You're going to put a little influence here, a little influence here, a little back and forth, and you're going to constantly fight over things while trying to do a dozen different variations of like little revolutions or whatever it is. I'm not using the correct terminology, but it's been a long time. It's a very complicated card-driven system. The card-driven system, there's a lot of games out there, and my entire takeaway from the Twilight Struggle is I think it's a masterpiece of a game, to an extent that takes like 2.5 hours to play, which is way too long for what it is, and 2.5 hours honestly can be playing it fast. Sometimes it can take you like 3 hours, if not longer, if you're playing some regular pacing. And you can get that entire experience from 1960, making it present. You can get that game in like an hour and a half, maybe, a much shorter experience, same concept of back and forth. And then 1960 left my collection because of Watergate, and Watergate's just the same experience in half an hour. And then you have also there's a chess game as well that's also really excellent. You should check out. But there are other games that do this complex tug of war system with card-driven systems and complex, clever movements, and they all give you the same experience in a shorter time frame. And yes, you will have people saying, but it's not the same experience. And you're right, it's not. But it's so much shorter and so much easier to get into. And I personally find, like, I have no interest in ever playing this game again. And specifically before I played this Not That video of comparing them, I dove into it again to be like, nope, I gotta give it a fair chance. It's been years since I played it. Let me play it again. And I did not. I couldn't go back to it after getting used to getting the same feeling from a game that was a third of the time, if not less.
Before I bring you the next game, because I don't know how heavy it will be, I'm just going to tell you, since you're not used to this setup over here, that every time that we're slamming the table, we're having some sound issues, since this is not a shotgun. Just to keep in mind. Show me the next game.
Whoops. Anyways, the next game. Speaking of games that have a lot of dice rolling where things don't always work out in your favor, we have Final Girl.
Yeah.
Now, have you played this one?
I have.
This game. So so what do you think of Final Girl? What's your opinion of Final Girl?
So Final Girl, it's actually, before you're going to even say something, I'm going to tell you, I think you're right. And this is exactly why in one of my next videos that I'm going to call out some of my games in order to make room for new games, Final Girl is probably going to leave the collection.
Interesting. So depending on when this video goes up, this game may not actually be in a SOS collection.
True.
But Final Girl, just for context to explain to you, again, Final Girl, going through the usual disclaimers as usual. I think this is a great game. It's a highly rated game. It is generally considered to be one of the best solo games out there. In fact, over on our channel itself, Professor Meg has this game rated as her #1 game of all time. It is a highly rated, highly respected game. But for me, it didn't work for me. Now, I've had fun with it. I think this is great in a lot of caveats. I think it does immersion storytelling incredibly well. The idea that as you go through the game, it's crafting stories, crafting a narrative. You have, people being killed. You're saving people. You have these items and searches, all the different things, the events that come on different ways. The combination of camp, the Final Girl, the killer you're fighting against. It crafts a story that you're going through it. And if you're there for good storytelling, this game is one of the best that has immersion storytelling. But mechanically, it has a mechanic that I personally don't like in games. It has a mechanic that I really don't like, and it's basically a cascading failure. The idea that in Final Girl, as you're playing through it, very often, if you fail certain cards, not all the cards, but if you fail certain cards, it raises the terror level, which has you rolling fewer dice next time. And so what happens is, when you fail, not only do you fail this event, you're actually more likely to fail the next one. Meaning that in general, when you fail anything in a game, the consequence is you don't get something. But cascading failure often means it's harder the next time as well, so it's even further punishing. Combine that with the fact that there are events. Like I had one game of Final Girl, and I don't want to say exactly what happened because I could be, it's been so long I may be misremembering to some degree, but my recollection is I basically ended the game turn 1. I drew an event, I didn't do a single thing, and the game was over. Now I don't remember for sure whether I just said, screw it, I'm done, or whether it actually lost. And that's why I want to be very careful about like my words in this one, because it's possible I don't. But I remember I was like, okay, that's done, it's over. I don't remember if it's like I literally lost, or if enough people were murdered in turn 1 before I could do a single thing to save anyone. But like there is randomness and chaos and dice rolling and cascading failure that ultimately have this as a game that I still have enjoyed playing it. I've had fun with this game, it's a good game, but in a collection full of great games, it's one of the worst games for me. And apparently leaving your collection.
True.
Anyways, that's going to be final goal, and we're continuing our trend of going from similarity to similarity. The next one we have is another one, the only other one that's on the shelf behind us, which is going to be Uprising. Curse of the Last Emperor over here. Cascading failure. Speaking of cascading failure, and our continued attempt to connect games to games, cascading failure. Now, full disclaimer as well on this one, I still think Uprising is a good game, and I have not played the newest iteration of Uprising. But Uprising has cascading failure. It has that aspect of as you fail in things, you have these cards that have markers in them, and every time you lose, the strength of your forces goes down. So again, same idea. Every time something goes right, congratulations, you're on top of the world, you're doing well. And every time something goes wrong, you are going to not only lose, but you're going to have a harder time winning next time. And I don't like that mechanic.
So the thing about the Uprising, which, if we're already talking about top 5, in my last top 5 games of all times, Uprising was up there. Okay. So now I'm starting to take it personally.
You should take it. This is your collection. You should take the whole thing personally.
So the thing is that I think that Uprising, before even going into that, I think like, and I know you haven't addressed that, so I'm just like saying it in regardless. I think the production value of this game is incredible. The table presence is amazing. Insane. Like for me, like just it's a true 4X cooperative game, and that is something that I do not think actually exists out there. Mm-hmm. Like not only 4X game, that it's already hard to find like a true 4X. And in my channel, I love 4X games. Also have it like in a cooperative kind of way. And not only that, like actually giving you a real challenge by fighting like 2 AIs, let's call it like that. Mm-hmm. And the 2 AIs actually fighting between themselves. And I know it sounds complex, but that actually works. So I think that one of the complaints that like people had, and of course I experienced it also, that the game is super punishing when it comes about like the dice rolling.
Yes.
If we already talk about
same idea.
Dice rolling. Right. So I think that even though I enjoy it tremendously because you can actually change the difficulty level by adjusting small things. So if you have there like 4 chapters, like numbered from 1 to 4, if that is a little bit too brutal for you, have a 1, 2, 3, 3. So that like is adjusting a little bit the difficulty. And you have like the possibility of doing small things like that just to make it that much easier. But I think, but again, sorry, that is something that you haven't talked, like I haven't seen yet. Their newest expansion, Titans of the First Age, just like changes so many things, like for the player, himself or herself or themselves, just to make it that easier and like make the game more flowing. Like, so again, I agree that with one like roll of dice, you can lose like your whole strategy, the whole army, but it will be that much easier actually to re-raise your army and proceed from there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, again, haven't played the new stuff. I still think it's a good game. I don't love that mechanic. But I also thank you for saying 4X, because I was wondering how I'm going to connect this game to the next one, because I need to connect all these games apparently. It's going to be a new challenge. This next game is another 4X game. So speaking of 4X games, we have Heroes of Land, Air, and Sea. Land, Air, and Sea. Heroes of Land, Air, and Sea. This is another 4X title, and it is great. It's a genuinely great game, which if you're like, well, why is it here over here? Why is it in this video? It's because there are still reasons why I don't own this. There's still reasons why I don't love this game, even though I kind of like aspects of this game a lot. Heroes of Land, Air, and Sea is a 4X game. It's a 4X game where you're going to have take control of a faction, you're going to have a bunch of heroes in the faction, you're going to have a ton of abilities in the faction, you're going to have a large board just sprawling out, trying to find various items, exploring all your typical 4X elements. And the reason I don't love Heroes of Land, Air, and Sea, again, although I do kind of love it, I'm just frustrated by aspects of it, is I find that Heroes of Land, Air, and Sea is either a game you have to be playing a ton of it, like a lot, or you have to be okay with the fact that you will frequently be hit with some random ability that you didn't know was present on your opponent's sheet, because you can't learn 30 abilities on every single, between the hero abilities, between the actual tableau. There's so many abilities in play. You can't learn like 60 abilities in a 4-player game. It's like I have to know 60 things about the other players, or constantly check their sheets, or alternatively, before you know it, your flying dragon's going to eat my people, and I didn't know that was a thing you can do. And that happens in this game a lot. You keep getting hit by the thing that you were planning the whole game to level up and power up and get your thing, but because you're not announcing it to the whole table every single 2 seconds, and because I can't read everything all the time, it's a game where I don't think you can fully appreciate what this game has to offer unless you're either okay with pure chaos and randomness, which for me, I'm not okay playing a 3-hour-long game, which is all of its strategy, only to have your dragon eat my person that I didn't know that could happen. Or alternatively, knowing everything by playing it a lot, or just doing a ton of research. So I like the game a lot, genuinely. I got rid of it because I couldn't handle those 2 options. I couldn't play this game enough to know everything, and I wasn't okay with the uncertainty of what was happening.
So let me first of all start with we're saying that you ready for it?
Go ahead.
In my opinion, this is not a 4X game because the
But is it called a 4X game?
Yeah, it's many games are called Scythe is called being 4X.
I won't even argue with you.
But right,
I won't even argue with you. I just need to connect the games.
Sure. Fair enough. So the thing is that I agree, and I think that because I got this with a like all expansions, mini expansions, whatever, for a relatively good price. So that is like immediately something that I don't know if I would have paid it like the last Game Found price that they wanted for it. I don't know if I would have paid that since I like got it for a fair price. I'm like, all right, I'll give it a chance. So I agree. There is a lot of chaos. Okay. So that is not maybe for everyone. I'll give you that. But I think that like the game itself is still fun, and since I'm not always playing, like I'll do my best to win, but for me it's more like the journey itself, and this has so many cool elements on the way to that like final thingy that at the end I'm like, alright, I lost, so now I know that maybe next time I'll have to pay attention more to that, but still I would like to table it again.
I theoretically would love to table it again. I just think I only appreciate this if I played it enough. But I do think if you're willing to play this game a lot, I think this is a really solid game here. I just don't know if I don't know if I'm going to play a game this long often enough to justify where it is. Now my tangents are going to start getting worse here because I don't have great ways to connect all these remaining games, but I will try going from, speaking of games that are overwhelming with the amount of variable things that can happen in them, we have Imperial Settlers. Not the best tangent. But my specific problem with Imperial Settlers is a little similar to that. Imperial Settlers is a good game. It's built on the bones of 51st State. I played the original 51st State way back when, before they ever came out with the Master Set. I played 51st State, then they came out with Imperial Settlers, then they came out with 51st State Master Set, then they came out with Imperial Settlers Emperors of the North, then they came out with the 51st State Master Set Ultimate Edition, and then I think there's a new one. I think there's like a next one. I don't know. They kept
called the 52nd State.
They should do the 52nd State. They have so many of these game systems, but I think Imperial Settlers was to me the least satisfying of them, specifically because there's complete chaos in how much stuff is happening. You just, in this game, at least for me when I've played this game, you have just resource generation beyond resource generation. In theory, the game's like 5 rounds. You only have 5 rounds to do stuff, but then the amount of just overflow of just stuff happening, especially coming at it from somebody who had played 51st State and 51st State Master Set later, I appreciate the tightness of those systems, and usually I don't like games to be too tight, but this was too loose. It just was resource generation left, right, and center. You just generate cards, and there's so much stuff that I didn't feel my engine was constricted when I played it. It gives you great art, tons of tableau building, you're constantly at just so many cards in play, but I just didn't feel the sense of restriction. And as much as I don't want games to be too tight, I do want to feel like I worked for what I had.
Sure.
And for me, I just didn't feel that.
Sure. I won't argue on that. Okay, I feel like I should because this game is in my collection since relatively the early days, I want to say, when I still like, not still, because I'm still doing that, like looking for games from designers that I respect, I want to see more of their work. I do think that I need to table it like at least 2-3 more times to understand if this game really stays in the collection or it's gotta be called.
Have you played Master Set?
I'm sorry?
Have you played the Master Set version?
I have not.
I do recommend that one. If you like the concept of what this game is doing, I do think Master Set is the same game but a little tighter.
Okay, I'll take that. I'll take that advice.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Anyways, that's going to be 51st State. And then, again, the tangents are going to get worse and worse. Speaking of games that have a whole lot of cards, I'm sorry, that's about as far as I can get now. Speaking of games that have a whole lot of cards, we have Dead of Winter, a Crossroads game. Yeah. Actually, the next two I can actually tangent pretty well. So this is the last two are lame. Dead of Winter's a Crossroads game. Now, this is an older title. This is an older title that basically has from Pladat Games. They've done a few Crossroads games since then. I think they had Gen 7, which didn't really do too well. But they've had some since then. They had Freelancers, I think, which I still want to play. And they've had a bunch of these Crossroads games. Some have been really well received. Some have not as much. But Dead of Winter is the one that started it all. And the Crossroads system is the idea that you have these cards that have specific engagements on them. So in this game, you're basically controlling a colony, an undead colony. There's not an undead colony, hopefully. But you're dealing with a bunch of zombies, the undead out there. You have your own colony of survivors, and then you have this crossroads system, which is going to have events triggering in the game based on specific things having happened. So you'll pass the card to another player, they'll read it, and it's like if certain criteria have come up, or I think, it's been a while since I played this, I think you can hold on to the crossroads cards until they trigger, or there's things like that. Don't remember exactly, but that's not really my overall point of the game.
Yeah.
My problem with Dead of Winter is that Dead of Winter is already a punishing game. It's theoretically a game with a hidden traitor. Theoretically. Okay?
True.
But when you play the game without a hidden traitor, it's already a punishing experience. and we play the game with a hidden trader, it's just that much more punishing. Like a game, if it's a cooperative system, it already feels hard to get forward and make progress and win and not die of frostbite or the next wound or the next situation. And then you introduce the element of, hey, by the way, Asaf might be actually trying to murder us and we don't know. I just find... And I haven't played this game a ton. I played this game a few times. I played it when it first came out, and I played it like a few years later, try to give it another shot. Neither time did it really work for me. I think there's fun elements here. I think trying to build up a base and trying to improve your survivors, there's fun elements in the game. But I found it to be a little too hard as it was. Actually, it's very similar to me to a different game, Shadows over Camelot from Days of Wonder. Kind of had the same system there. Kind of like it's a cooperative game with smaller player counts and a hidden trader game with higher player counts. And in both cases, kind of the same situation. The cooperative game is already hard. The semi-cooperative game is just a nightmare. And so that's just not I didn't quite appreciate that as much about this game.
So I'll be honest with you. First of all, it has two subjects that I kind of love. It's like something apocalyptic and has zombies. And for me, it was already a good reason to get this game. Also, it was like in a fairly price, so it's like that much better. But the thing is that I think that, again, this is a game that came to my collection in relatively the early days of like just basically board gaming. I got into board games not that much like time ago. So I think that this is like with those mechanisms, I think that this is a relatively good entry, like even if it's hard, even if it's punishing, which is something that basically I appreciate in a game. I like a game that is punishing because I like the challenge, even though like I can lose, I don't know, 6 times and only like win the 7th time. I'm okay with that, you know? But I think that today there might be like better options to play a game that has like a possible trader in the group or something like that. So I think, again, that Dead of Winter, it's relatively a simple game to take, right, to learn it. That this can be, with those mechanisms, a good entry-level game to a collection if you're looking for. So I think that like a player that haven't seen a ton of games will appreciate that game.
I think that's true.
But with that, this is probably going to get called in one of my next videos. Should have prepared a list before.
I wouldn't have been able to find 10 games if we had. I wouldn't have been able to find 10 games. This collection was hard. Like sometimes I've believed more in how much I want to attack these games. And honestly, some of these I do. Like I have issues with some of them. Twilight Struggle for sure. But like something like Heroes of Land and Sea, like my biggest complaint is you have to play it more. It's a bit of a stretch. I know. I'm sorry. But speaking of post-apocalyptic games, I told you I have a good tangent for this one.
Yeah.
We have This War of Mine. Are you getting rid of it?
Alex, what are you Absolutely not.
Oh, okay, great. This is going to be fun then.
Absolutely not.
This War of Mine. Now, to be clear, this is actually in the very first time I ever did one of these top 10 worst games in person on Visiting's collection, we had This War of Mine. Now, the difference is, back then, I did something that I try not to do with this series. This was a game, at the time, I hadn't even played it. I don't love pulling a game off the shelf that I haven't even played and being like, this is the worst game. It's like I haven't even played it. But my concern about it was all the things I had heard about it, and then I have since played it, which is why I'm willing to bring it back this time around. Because all the things I said the first time around are mostly true. This War of Mine is based on an IP. It's based on This War of Mine, the video game, and it's basically it's based on This War of Mine, the video game, and it's a game of like war and survival. And you basically have a camp, and you try to you're in the shelter underground. And you assign these survivors to like go out at night and have various events and go on this little choose your own adventure. It's from Awakened Realms. Actually, is it Awakened Realms? I don't even know if it is technically. It's like 8-Bit Studios, Galactic Studios. Yeah. I think it's like from Awakened Realms.
I think you'll find a certain connection.
There's Awakened Realms on the back. There we go. I thought so. And it's it basically you are trying to manage your colony type situation. You're constantly trying to dig further and find more stuff. You're going out. You go on these epic little elaborate choose your own adventures where you visit a church in the middle of the night. You meet the pastor. You go and you engage with the pastor in some way. Maybe you mug him. Maybe you talk to him. And you have these whole things, and you have little raids in your colony. And the entire system is an incredibly intricate, elaborate survival game of depression. That's what it is. It's a survival game of depression. It is sad. It is hard. It reminds you of the realities of war. If you're here for the thematic immersion, by all means, this is a great game for you because war is harsh and punishing and not fun, and this game is harsh and punishing and not fun. Unless you really want that survival element. Again, it's a well-rated, well-loved game. To be very clear, I found that a game like this, to me, it just felt like a struggle the whole way through. I didn't have moments of like, yay, I'm building fun things and surviving. I had moments of like, okay, I made it through the night reluctantly because I have just enough of those resources, and now I can wander out tomorrow and desperately hope I can get something to stay alive. This wasn't a game of building, this was a game of survival, which for those who like that, great. I didn't like that.
So the thing is, I'll give you a small analogy, okay? When you're seeing a movie, okay, when you're reading a book, and that book is giving you, or that movie giving you like sad feelings, okay?
Yes.
You might be actually appreciative towards the director, towards the screenwriter,
100%.
because they made you feel the way they wanted you to feel.
100%.
You know, I think, and this war of mine, man, I got goosebumps when I'm talking about this game. I think that game is so good in the way that they want to actually give you the feelings. It's not
Agreed.
that it's right. They're like the war is terrible. You're going to feel like, I wish that 90% of the people, and I'm sorry, of writing actually the narrative for campaign games will be actually the writers that did it for this war of mine, because you have like relatively a big book of like small paragraphs or whatever what happening in the story, and that is written so fluffing good. Okay, that is written so good that you're actually
It's great.
you have shivers, you know, something like you're genuinely sad. Now, you might want to play a game that's like, oh, you know, and this is a war, I'm a soldier, I'm going to, like, you know, kill the bad guys or whatever. Not everyone is a soldier. And
I
that
agree.
is something that is amazing. That game is punishing because war is punishing. You know, you have like this whole events, rat infestation, you don't have canned food, you're hungry.
Yeah.
And that is amazing, because your whole game now is going to change, and you're not going to go to the close location, you're going to the further one, because even though there is more risk, you will need more time, whatever. And that is something that I find amazing in this game. And I'm not even talking about like the small story campaign mode that you have like with the 2 expansions of this game. That is a game that I will table any day of the week.
I don't disagree with the word you said. I just don't like the game because of that. It made you feel, like, again, the depression of war was present. The choose your own adventure text you go through, the depression and the choices and the seriousness, all of that was present.
Right.
I just don't know if that's what I want in a board game experience.
That's fair enough, but that's the same. That's the same thing that you'll go to a movie that, you know, it's not like a comedy or a cartoon. You were saying like, but I don't want to see sad movie. You know, I'm sorry, you're watching like how it's called, Little Women, for example.
Yeah.
You're going to cry at the end of the movie. I'm sorry, you know, but
At
that
the end,
that is.
there's joy mixed into those movies.
There is
pure sadness the
I
whole
don't know
way
if
through.
there's a lot of joy over there with plagues and everything, but it's not the point of it.
It's mixed in. It's
what
mixed
I'm saying
in.
is,
To me, the problem is that they weren't the highs. They didn't just get movies that are sad that have good moments in them. The highs, the lows, the highs, the lows. There's a journey.
Right.
This is the lows, the lower, the lows, the lower.
But you know what? When the war, like when you're reaching to that card and you're saying like war has ended, I kid you not, you have that, you like literally that joyment, you know, like blood is rushing into your organs or something, and it feels so. You survive, and you actually kept your people alive, and then you have like the end of the story, you know, like what happened after that, and like the epilogue, and that is so much. That is amazing. Show me a campaign game that you're so involved and engaged in the story that you actually care. Oh, you were meeting someone who's selling you an axe and you pay 2 gold. All right. His name is Unger. Well, who gives a fluff, you know? But this game is so, I'm sorry, so good.
Speaking, I have a lot of connection points in this one.
Yeah.
Speaking of solo-friendly games that are based on video games in which you are tightly punished for the amount of resources you actually have access to, we have Stardew Valley. Which doesn't seem like it's the exact same words, but those exact same words apply to this game.
All right.
Stardew Valley. Now, I've had fun with this game. I think Stardew Valley has its moments. I think Stardew Valley has its highs. I would rather play Stardew Valley over this War of Mine, I'll tell you that much. But it is based on the video game, a light, fluffy video game, and it seems harder than you'd expect given what it's based off of.
Sure.
Stardew Valley to me is a game that, again, based on the famous video game, you're going to be trying to save Grandpa's farm or something like that. You've inherited your Grandpa's old farm, you're trying to turn around and all that stuff. I finally started playing the video game for the first time. Didn't get very far, but I finally started playing it. And this is based on that very mass market friendly IP, and it is very hard. Now, I will say, disclaimer aside, I played the first edition of this game. When I played this, I played it a few times, but I played the first edition. They have made some tweaks to the second edition, so I do want to give that disclaimer in case you're interested in the game, but I only played it based on the first edition. And in the first edition, the main problems I had with it, or number one, is that unless you're playing it with all 4 characters, it doesn't feel balanced around other player counts.
Okay.
And I've played it a few times at lower player counts and just lost every time. Whereas when I played at 4 players, like, oh, 4 characters, not 4 players. You can play it solo with all 4 characters. it's a different experience. But they didn't print that on the box, which means multiple of my plays of this game were like, yay, we have no chance. Okay, cool. We're playing it the last years, and we still have no chance. Look at that. We still have no chance. There was more sunlight in this game than in this War of Mine, but the actual general idea of lack of resources, unless you're playing it at 4 players, was very present. And the second aspect of it is my favorite mechanic in the game is the cave diving, which in initial versions of the game was not
like
balanced.
When you're going to the mine,
yeah, going to mine,
yeah.
not cave diving, mining. Which in early editions of the game was apparently not balanced around success, especially if you got that one objective where you have to descend all 12 levels into the mine, whatever it is. The game was not balanced around that in terms of the ease or accessibility, wherever it is. Again, they made tweaks to that in subsequent versions. That means my favorite thing to do was actually one of the harder things to do to progress in the game, which meant that for me, the Stardew Valley was a good concept and a fun cooperative game that I've enjoyed my time with to a degree, but I moved on from it because of the lack of player balance and even activity balance that, again, I believe they've addressed in subsequent editions of the game, which is a weird place to be, so I want to be clear about that. But my experience with it was definitely it detracted because of that.
So, first of all, I just like to say I haven't played the PC game or something like that, not the first edition, whatever. This is basically, this game is one of my things that I got like on my quest to find like the top farming game or games, because I have no idea why. I just want a good farming game. I know it's super weird, but it's just what it is.
I don't even know if this is the first or second edition.
I have no idea.
Either way.
Yeah, open it up.
I'll look at the
so
rulebook.
the thing is that while I do agree with you, and I think that I would never play this game at more than 2 players, and even the second player has to be like my significant other or someone who's very close to me, because I don't want like to call just like a game night, having like randomly like a stranger or not a close friend and start debating on which decisions we want to make. For me, this is a solo game, okay? Or maximum with 2 people, and the other person is someone that I don't know, very close to me. When you have that kind of... So first of all, again, it's a nightmare to play it in more than 2. But the thing is that I don't think that in that case you need to have only like 2 workers or 2 characters. If you're playing alone, then play all the 4 characters. You're playing with 2 people, each one is controlling 2. So I don't know if this is something... Because I 100% agree that because each character has their own specialty, right? I think that if you're choosing only 2 characters because you're 2 players, the game is not balanced and it will be that much more difficult. About the mine, I think that just like deciding according to a roll of a die if you're actually going to find that piece of stone or gem or whatever in order to upgrade your tools or whatever, yeah, that is...
I mean, so much of the game is rolls with the dice. It's just that one's worse.
True, but that one is almost like necessary for you to win the game, because if you can not upgrade your material, you're going to lose.
Yeah.
That is something that is relatively easy to house rule. Tell you that I'm the biggest fan of house ruling games? No. Okay, I think a game should come already baked, ready to be eaten, right? But if this is the only thing that is going to like disturb me than having like a good farming game, I'll take that on me. With that,
it's leaving his collection. Maybe. I don't know.
No. What I wanted to say is that this game is giving you really the whole like the art and everything really gives you the feeling that you're playing like those one like farm small games that you're playing on your iPhone or whatever.
It's a little Twitch game. You
right?
play it on your Switch game. You play on the Switch. You throw Stardew Valley on. You play it. I own the game. I can play it. It's a fun game. It's a fun game. For me,
opening this box is like opening Farmville, or something like that. And I appreciate that they like made you feel.
Like it has that fluffiness.
Yeah, it has that. And after this War of Mine, I need a dose of Stardew Valley.
I hear that. Again, I almost think it's weird because like this War of Mine is like war is punishing, you should lose, and that's fine. Versus Stardew Valley, you're gonna die.
The war has begun.
Yeah, it's a little different kind of vibes. That's just it. These are the top 10 worst games in EZBoardGames collection, at least by my count. You can tell me down below which ones I'm wrong about. I generally get a bunch of those comments, and that's okay because, again, I think it's more interesting to pick games that actually are well-respected and well-liked, and picking Risk off the bottom shelf, he doesn't really have a lot of bad games. Picking Risk off the bottom shelf just wouldn't have been that interesting of a conversation. But with that, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. This is us off, and have a good one.
See ya.